For this section of material, we're just going to be solving linear equations, which just means solving equations with one variable. Now, we've been doing this over and over and over again so far, so these problems are just going to get slightly more complicated, a little bit more complex, but the ideas and the rules will never ever change. So keep in mind your properties, that addition property, the multiplication property, meaning that you can add anything you want to both sides. You can divide or multiply anything you want to both sides. Also, another thing to keep in mind is before you begin solving any equation, all distribution has to be done first. Otherwise, you're going to get very confused in what you're doing. So we're going to kind of add that new rule since we've just talked about the distribution property. Then we're going to add that into our solving matrix there. Okay, so our first problem here says solve negative 3x plus 1 equals negative 2 times 4x plus 3. Now, hopefully, you will recognize this right-hand side of the equation as being a distribution property. That's what we worked on in that last section of material. If you recognize that, then remember our new rule that we just added. Before we start solving equations, all distribution has to be done first. So that means that we're going to have to distribute that negative 2 throughout the parentheses. So now we'll have negative 3x plus 1 equals negative 2 times 4x is negative 8x, and negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. Now we can begin combining like terms and solving for x. So the first thing that we're going to do is to add 8x to both sides so we can combine those variable terms, which will cancel out the 8x, the negative 8x on the right-hand side. And now when we combine our like terms now, we've got negative 3x plus 8x would be 5x. Then we still have plus 1, and on the right side of the equals we have a negative 4. Now we need to get rid of our plus 1 next, so we're going to subtract 1, doing the opposite. Subtract 1 to both sides, which will cancel out our positive 1, and now we have left 5x equals negative 4 and negative 1 make negative 5. Now we're still not completely done because we still have 5 times x and we want x by itself. So let's divide both sides by 5, and now we have x equals negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. In our next example, here we have a fraction, a bunch of fractions, and nobody ever likes the fractions. Well, we can get rid of those if we want to. All we have to do is multiply through by the common denominator. So first of all, I'm going to rewrite this problem, and I'm leaving a little bit of space between each one of those terms, because I want to show that I am multiplying through by that common denominator, which in this case is 3. Now by doing that, let's look at this very first term first. When I multiply 3 times 2/3 x, the 3's will cancel because we have one in the numerator and one in the denominator. So all we have left is 2x. In our next term here, our 3's are going to cancel again, so we have plus 4 equals. Now in our last term, when we do our multiplication, again the 3's will cancel, and so we have negative 2. Now this is much better for us to start working with. So in order to get x alone, the first thing we're going to do is to subtract 4 from both sides, which will cancel out our positive 4. We're left with 2x equals negative 2, and negative 4 is negative 6. And then if we divide both sides by 2 to get x alone, that will cancel out the 2, and we have x equals negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3.